There was like a switch at the back of my head that somehow just flicked on. It was like it tripped. And all of a sudden, I just was like, okay, I don't want to live the life that my parents lived. Of course, they struggled, first generation immigrants, very grateful to them. But I want to do something more.
Welcome to the Oz Property Investment Mastery Podcast. My name's PK and I help busy people build passive income by buying top 5% growth and cash flow property and build a portfolio using data without wasting months doing research, spending weekends at inspection or catching flights, or dropping $10,000 to $20,000 on buyer's agents every single time. So if you're confused, lack confidence, and just overwhelmed with all the information and marketing misinformation available online and don't know where to start, then this show is for you.
Speaking with Managing Director PK Gupta of Consulting by PK. Since he began property investing in 2011, he has built his own portfolio and helped many others build passive income through property with his distinctive data-driven system. Today, he takes on a new adventure in business and life with his family in North America. Following when he first shared his journey as a property investor at the peak of his game, Gupta now eagerly lends a unique perspective to a different kind of culture and day-to-day he has in the USA.
Life has changed a lot since we had our last session. So right now, as we speak, I'm sitting in the Bay Area in a city called Menlo Park, which is in Silicon Valley in the US. We moved here about 6 months ago to create another base. We still have our base in Queensland and in the Gold Coast where our other family home is, but this is a second base. And really, what's going on is not a whole lot of property stuff. Of course, we have bought a home here, but really, my life has shifted in a sense of going away from economics, so to speak, in terms of personal economics, personal finance focus, to more exploring internal developmental opportunities, insofar as giving my son, who's 6 years old now, a kind of ecosystem and energy here in the Bay Area, which is, all the biggest tech companies are here. And it's not even just about tech. There's just a sense of like anyone can achieve anything because a lot of the greatest achievements in the world have been born out of literally a 5-mile radius of where I'm sitting right now. So that gives people a lot of hope, and that's one reason we've moved here for the time being, to let that energy rub off onto us and let it dictate what the next 5 or 10 years of our life looks like.
Taking the wheel with both hands on his new path in life, Gupta doesn't hesitate to highlight what is most important on the path to building the private school he has always envisioned.
We don't have any crystal clear plans as to how long we'll be here, or, I'm not looking to make money here or anything like that. But like we were talking before, it is a dream of mine, and we're slowly starting to see it into fruition, to start a not-for-profit private school, to create a different type of educational learning opportunity for kids here who, maybe have lost their spiritual values, maybe aren't financially literate, maybe are quite unsatisfied with life because their parents are very, very successful, and they have this huge pressure to also be that. But then their definition of success is quite linear. And so this school, I'm hoping it's not like doing an orphanage in Sri Lanka. We're not trying to, educate, those in poverty. And so it's hard sometimes to explain why we're doing this, but it's, sometimes you can have all the material wealth in the world, but be spiritually impoverished. So that's why that's a big project that I'm starting here.
As someone who articulates his ideas very clearly, Gupta expounds on his holistic goal of impacting children in their academic journey, emphasizing the necessity of partnering with their parents.
I think the dream or vision of this school is not to ignore your traditional academic curriculum. This area, probably more so than any part of the US, maybe even the world, at least the Western world, focuses on education as being more important than anything else. Like if you go for a tour of Google, you probably see, I'm making this up, you probably see like 40% Indian, 40% Asian, and then 20% everything else. And so with that kind of demographic mix comes a real sense of like, you either have to be an entrepreneur, or here it's not even like it was when I was growing up where it's like, doctor, lawyer, or failure. Here it's like entrepreneur or failure. So the stakes are even, and it's not just any entrepreneur, like, this has to be some sort of unicorn, because the parents are so successful. So our vision is to redefine success in a way that doesn't alienate those parents, because I think at the root of it, I'm networking, I'm meeting so many successful entrepreneurs. They're in their 30s, they're in their 40s. You know, One thing I should also say is people here aren't, it's not like when I used to live on the Gold Coast where the first thing you do when you get money is buy a fancy car, buy a fancy house. Here, you go out and I mean, in front of Mark Zuckerberg's house, he owns like a Tesla, a Toyota. He doesn't even have a European car, except, they're all the same. They're very unassuming. They're not out there to show off. But at the same time, a lot of these founders, because they have everything, they're starting to realize that they've kind of missed what's truly important, and they don't know how to give that to the next generation. That next generation has been, born with a silver spoon, and they just really don't know how to give them an all-round, happy experience, a happy life, because they are starting to find that they have kind of missed it themselves. They've missed the trick on the journey. So I think our dream is to both connect with the parents and also, of course, the kids from a young age, and provide both the traditional curriculum, but also then more spiritual values. Not necessarily, a sectarian view of the world, but spiritual values that are universal, that they can hold. And I think that that will fly. I think that will go down well in California, where generally people are open to these sorts of things.
Gupta has never been shy of telling it as it is, including the ups and downs of his life story. He gives a rundown of his unique upbringing that brought him from India to New Zealand, then eventually to Australia.
I was born in India and we migrated when I was 4 years old to New Zealand. So I grew up in a small place called Christchurch on the South Island, and then for the most part in a small place called Napier on the east coast of the North Island of New Zealand. And that was a really nice upbringing. You were sharing with me before, Tyron, how you've just recently gone to South America and all your amazing experiences in the Amazon. Of course, New Zealand is not the Amazon.
Still beautiful.
Is a sense of, like, simplicity, at least back in the '90s, early 2000s, about New Zealand. So, I think that was a great place to grow up. However, we weren't super well off, and I think that's what sparked in me. I think when I was 13 or 14, Google was just becoming a thing. I remember Googling at lunchtime when everyone else was out playing soccer, which I would also do normally. I was Googling, how to get rich, or what jobs will make me the most money when I graduate. And this thing of investment banking came up. And then, I don't know, there was like a switch at the back of my head that somehow just flicked on. It was like it tripped. And all of a sudden, I just was like, okay, I don't want to live the life that my parents lived. Of course, they struggled, first generation immigrants, very grateful for them, but I want to do something more. And so that's when I really knuckled down in my studies. We moved as a family to Brisbane. I went to University of Queensland, studied finance, got an internship at Macquarie Bank, then got a grad role at JP Morgan. And it's a bit like these entrepreneurs here. I was making six figures right out of uni, but as kind of like this was a whole like fake out, because not only am I not happy, I'm working really hard, 90 hours a week. I'm not seeing my girlfriend. There has to be something different. And so I had to, I don't know, trip that switch again and see, all right, well, I've achieved my materialistic dream, so adolescent dream, you could say, but there has to be some other way to support myself, and so that's where the property bug bit me. And I think a lot of people know my story, but it's nothing remarkable, no rags to riches per se. Good borrowing capacity. I use data to buy in, I would say, mix regional and capital cities, and I did it all by myself. made some mistakes, some property, or one property especially, that's hardly gone up even now. And yeah, and I suppose the rest is history, as it is for a lot of property investors who, started as soon as they can.
A humble man of humble origins indeed, Gupta draws the curtains open on the beginnings of how he shifted from working as an analyst to pursuing property investing.
I just remember very distinctly our office was on George Street at the time, JP Morgan. I used to get in at 7 a.m., kind of like rubbing my eyes because I'd gone to sleep at like 3 a.m. I caught a bus in, everyone was already there, and makes me look bad. And then there was this new a gas company called Eastern Star Gas that JP Morgan wanted to start covering in its research. So I was in the equities research team covering oil and gas stocks. So I remember very distinctly, I was a graduate analyst, and my associate, sort of the one level up, he I won't mention any names, but he was quite an alpha type individual, and he said, "Look, we want to start covering this stock in 3 months. You're on lead." And then I'm fresh out of university. I don't really even know how to use Excel or do modeling or DCF cash flow or valuation techniques. I certainly don't know how to create a 300-page research report. I was given this at 21 years of age. And initially, it was very daunting, and then, my nature of, I suppose, trying to be a high achiever kicked in, and I spending nights modeling it, trying to understand, okay, how's FX, how's the oil price, how's global, how to create this model with all its value drivers. And then I think 2 months in, I was just sitting there thinking like, okay, I'm making 100K, but, like, this is not really that fun. And then I was looking at my boss, and then his boss, and then his boss, and none of them were doing anything differently to me. I mean, they were making far more money than me. Sure, 7 years into it, I'd be on $1 million probably if I was good. But, like, it just seemed everyone was, I don't know, like, working hard and then drinking hard and partying hard, and I was not really into that kinda lifestyle to numb yourself just so you can go back to work for 90 hours a week. So yeah, I just remember being drowning in Excel, which I prided myself on, but then thinking there has to be another way. And so then property is obviously, everyone talks about property. As a stock market person, you always scoff at property, or that's for the less intelligent people. As a stock investor, I can far outdo you now. I kind of sing the opposite rhetoric. And yeah, I started getting into it, and you go to those seminars, as and they talk about infrastructure, growth corridors, negative gearing, and because I was somewhat like not naive to fundamental investment principles, that stuff didn't stick with me. Like, it seemed a bit, too good to be true. If everyone could just follow these 5 bullet points of buying close to a CBD train station, why isn't everyone retired, right? Um, so I kind of was disillusioned, and I built my own system. Back then in 2009 or 10, I think CoreLogic had just come in. If Don't quote me, I think it was something like that, to Australia. And then 2011, you could finally buy wholesale data from them. And so I did that. It was quite expensive. And I built my own sort of regression analysis. Not like anything amazing, I would say in hindsight, but enough to kind of normalize for autocorrelation, enough to see, what actually matters from a multivariate perspective. And so then I quickly realized what these people were saying in terms of being close to the ocean grows faster, or being close to a train station, a school, even a private school. None of this stuff just ended up mattering. So I built my own system, and I started buying. And my first one was in Gosford, in New South Wales. And I mean, it wasn't like these days where someone buys and it goes up like 100K in 2 months.
That's crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, back then, 20K in, like, 4 months was like, "Oh, yeah, that thing's going up in value." It's like property market's different in a sense now. It's like there's a different dynamic, which we can talk about. But yeah, that's how I first got into it. And then when you see that, even just $20,000 gain off a, I think, 40 or $50,000 deposit, I was like, "Oh, this is not really something I'm able to do in the stock market repeatably," because even despite having a lot of contacts and know-how. So then I was like, yeah, that was my aha moment, so to speak. And then, it's not like once again, these days people have like 5 properties in 6 months or something. It took me 3 years to get 5 years to get 3 properties, I think, or 3 or 4. So I definitely didn't leave my day job anytime soon. I did downgrade, and all investment bankers will know it's a downgrade to management consultancy. I did downgrade to management consulting, more lifestyle balance and more time to devote to property, and it's only until I think it was 2020, yeah, 2020 that I was able to leave my 9 to 5 with a modest it was a 120K passive income, but I'm very proud that that entire passive income was not because I had created a course business or a buyer's agent business, but that 120K passive was all because of those buy and hold properties and develop some development deals that I did based on my PAYG serviceability. Of course, now the passive income is way more, but it's really easy to say, "Oh, yeah, I've got 250 to 300K passive income," but you know, when you have a business, things take off, but that 120K was no business income, which I was very proud of.
Although he had built his passive income while doing management consultancy, Gupta plainly sheds light on the somewhat peculiars of his work schedule.
It's really irrational because a lot of work gets given on your desk at like 3 p.m. And in the morning, you're generally like not so busy. You can have a long lunch or you can go for a place. I used to play soccer at lunch, go for a run, catch up on the news, be aware of the market. But it's like the work gets to you at 3 p.m., and I think that's because that's when your boss has had time to kinda digest what the market has done. That's where your buy side ultimately, your customer, your clients who are paying for the research, who are paying for the trades, that's when they, ask things, and then, the culture is we want it now. So then you have to get it all out by that night, publish it, and then it goes on Bloomberg, but it doesn't matter if it's 10 p.m., 11 p.m., 12, 1, 2, but it has to be done then and there. And then I think there's this human nature, which is kind of, it sucks that my boss was treated really badly. He's gonna then treat me really badly. And if I'd stuck around, like, who knows? If I became executive director, vice president, I would have treated my associate badly because that's all I would have known. I'm like, that is the culture. And so it carries on from one generation to the next.
Now, armed with a better understanding of his past, Gupta takes a beat and reflects on what he describes as the biggest mistake of his property journey.
Made many, many mistakes. I think we could do a whole podcast on that, but I think the biggest mistake, and it's not like, it took me backwards, but I bought in cans because I should have known better. At the time, there was news that there was this Hong Kong billionaire who was going to start a casino. I think it was called the Aquis Casino or something like that. I'm pronouncing that wrong, probably. Um, and there was a lot of, like, lot of buyers agents or just economists, a lot of people in the news saying, this is gonna make Cannes into like a Las Vegas or something like that. I mean, not quite, but something like that. And I was like, "Oh, I need part of this action." And so I bought there and I ignored my own data system, which is, I think these days in 2025, there's so much data. People know how to use data. You don't need to use a course necessarily or a buyer's agent or, some basics are available for everyone. But I ignored that um, just because I was like, I need to get in quick. And that property pre COVID basically was flat. So that's like 6 years of huge opportunity cost. Yes, it was paying for itself, but the opportunity cost of buying, let's say in Hobart in 2015, which I also did, it was probably like that property should have doubled by 2019 or by 2020. And so, yes, it's not a mistake in the sense that I lost money, but it's a blessing and a curse. I'm a perfectionist. And so, when you make a mistake like that, I tend to beat myself up. I'm very self-critical and I just can't get that out of my head. So, for me that was a big thing, and I really take that as a lesson to like take the emotions out of property investing. Even if you've been successful in your first 3 properties, that doesn't mean the next one is guaranteed to be successful. You need to, just like in stock trading, if you have a algorithmic method or principles that work, just because that stock is falling or just because that stock is booming, don't change your principles. Stick to what, has worked in the past. And I diverted from that, and that was a big mistake.
Without a doubt, Gupta values the lessons he has gleaned from retrospection. Looking back on an even deeper note, he underscores another realization he thinks is a mistake in his property and success journey.
I think another one is, I think this is not like strictly monetary. It's not enjoying the journey. I think it's only during COVID. It's probably true for a lot of people that you kind of assess your life, and and for me, I thought, okay, I've just been on the go, like single, like, so focused on a single objective of building passive income. Of course, that's served me, but who is who who's the person that I've become in that process? And yeah, sure, I, have a son, I got married and, did all that sort of thing. But I felt that I didn't stop and smell the roses through the journey, and that's actually, like, a huge regret. I think, it's cliche, but they often ask a person like Bill Gates of, you know, what what would you trade to get 20 years of your life back or to be 20 years younger? And he'd say, like, "I'd trade my entire wealth." And, that would just take him down to, like, 40, so it's not even that he's super young. But, I mean, I'm not quite at that level, but there's a sense of like, okay, I used that decade to get ahead financially, but I don't feel like I grew spiritually as a person. I don't think my relationships, um, like I can't think of a single strong relationship that I built in that period apart from, of course, close family. And, that's a big regret of mine. I think that's a big mistake of mine. And if I was to do it again, I would probably happy to have deferred my passive income achievement or goal into maybe 15 years to then be able to have more pride in my inner self and say, okay, well, you know, you you built your character, you're now more compassionate towards people, not just in a way that you think you are, but you actually demonstrated it through physical action, that, you became more humble, that you genuinely thought, from the heart of hearts that if someone, that even if they treated you badly, that you would still treat them with compassion and you'd still see them as equal to you. All these very lofty ideals that I value now, I didn't value at the time, and I think my investment in those could have, reaped much more fruits by now if I had, watered those seeds back then.
Having been able to build and follow his varying systems in life and business, Gupta reflectively points out the most probable explanation for why he pursued monetary success more than building his inner self when he was younger.
I think that is a lot to do with childhood conditioning and things that you missed out on in childhood because of a lack of abundance or resources. And so immediately when you go off into the big wide world on your own, your or my focus became, how do I fill that cup of financial abundance, as opposed to realizing, actually the financial dimension of my life is like one cup. There are so many other dimensions, so many other cups that I should be filling simultaneously at least, but I kind of ignored them. I don't. I mean, the perfectionist in me blames myself. A more compassionate person in me kind of doesn't blame myself because we all have that kind of upbringing, conditioning. But yeah, I think that was the most important thing, and I think, things like what I'm working on right now, trying to dissolve myself of things like greed, trying to dissolve myself of anger, comparison, envy. These things aren't something you can switch off in the back of your head. They take it's like getting gum stuck in your hair. It's like you can try to shampoo that off. It takes a while, unless you just cut your hair, which not recommended. But you need some sort of solvent, and yeah, these are the things I'm working on at the moment, and I wish I had started earlier because, especially with a young family, who you are is what you project and manifest in your family. And when I have a young son, he's 6 years old, and they're like sponges at that age. And for me, I feel real bad when he snaps. Let's say he snaps at his teacher or a friend, which is in a way it's normal, because I realize, okay, he's only learned to do that because of me, right? Because I've snapped. He tends to be very self-critical, not because we tell him he's bad or he's not doing anything right. I mean, we encourage him, all the rest of it, hopefully good parents, but he sees me being self-critical, me being such a hard taskmaster on myself, and so then he thinks, "Oh, daddy's like that. That is what good looks like." Children take that on, and so for me, it's like the ultimate self-help course is having a kid, because they'll become who you are, basically, and I don't want him I'm not saying this in a humble way, but I want him to be better than me in terms of his character.
For sure.
And so I have to get to that benchmark for him to get there.
As a self confessed person of faith, Gupta credits his holistic worldview of having a realistic and humble point of view of one's life in this great big world.
I know you're a man of faith, Tara, and I'm also a person of faith. And I think not to go into a religious, diatribe, but when you were speaking to me before about your journey in the Amazon, I remembered that back in the day, let's say many hundreds of years ago, or maybe even thousands of years ago, when you talk about the Aztecs or civilizations like this, oftentimes if someone was going through a traumatic experience or someone was going through something that was really troubling them in life, the village elder or the shaman even would take them to an opening, and they would simply lie on their back and they would look up at their stars very intently. And of course, back then there was no air pollution, etc. So you could see the galaxies, you could see the other worlds that were out there.
Yeah,
And what that helped do was give the person who was going through those issues perspective of, okay, I'm significant. Of course, I'm consciousness, I'm a living entity, I'm the soul, let's say, if you believe that. I'm a significant thing, but at the same time, I'm not the significant thing. That I'm not the center of the universe, rather I'm existing to serve the center of the universe, to serve you know, all that is. And that can be on a macro, or it can be on a micro basis, or, people around you, things around you. So by looking up at the stars, that gives them perspective, it gave them context, and it gave them clarity. So I think the thing that has helped me with all of this inner work is really every day meditating, ruminating, and focusing on my I mean, it sounds very cliched. It doesn't come out in the way that I think about it, but it's my calling, or my purpose for being. And it's not like my passion. Passion is different from purpose, but when I'm on my deathbed, let's say, in X years' time, will I be happy that I achieved everything that I wanted to do? And will I be happy that I became the person that I wanted to become? And then for me, the most important thing is, or I'm trying to make it the most important thing, will I be satisfied that did good for others, that I lived a life of service, that I just I left it all out on the field, so to speak. And that's what I try to ruminate on. I definitely am under indexing on that third dimension right now, but I think that at the 11th hour, like that's all that's going to matter really.